Hey, everybody. Welcome to SmartBug On Tap. I'm your host, Casey Peddicord, and today we are unpacking a topic that can make or break your HubSpot implementation. Integrations, right? Specifically, how to make HubSpot play nice with the rest of your tech stack when you're operating at an enterprise scale. So whether you're syncing from Salesforce, you're connecting to NetSuite, or you're trying just to get clean, reliable data across your go-to-market systems, integrations are the connective tissue that are really holding all that together. And when they don't work, man, you totally feel it, right? Luckily, I'm joined by someone who lives and breathes this stuff on a day-to-day basis, Justine Verrier, SmartBug's technical solutions engineer. Justine, welcome. Can you give the listeners a quick intro and tell us a little bit more about your background?
Casey, super excited to be here. I've spent the last 10 years in the HubSpot ecosystem, focusing on helping customers connecting their system in a way that actually supports scales. On a daily basis, I work on some really complex integration projects, everything from CRM migration to building out bidirectional things between HubSpot and ERP, such as NetSuite. Basically, I eliminate manual work, reduce data friction, and improve how teams work together.
That's awesome. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you on the show today, because I feel like integrations can feel like this sort of mysterious black box, like especially at the enterprise level, but they are definitely key to making your HubSpot instance work the way that you want it to, or the way that teams really need it to. So today we are going to demystify that box a little bit. We'll talk about what makes an integration enterprise grade, quote unquote, where things go wrong, and how to build a setup that truly scales. So let's dive in. Justine, when enterprise buyers say that they need an enterprise grade integration, what does that really mean? Like, what makes an integration enterprise grade?
Yes, Casey, good question. Like, I usually categorize those type of requests in two different buckets. So the first one is a fast-paced, fast-growth companies that can see the big waves coming ahead and they want to anticipate their need and go ahead and connect their ERP, then their CRM, their sales tool, and just have this tech stack ready for when time come where things are going to get rocky. Like, they are expecting fast growth and they want to be ready. We also have on the other end companies where their tech stack grew so large, like they have so many pieces floating around and they now need a unified source of truth. They need to have a seamless process, but we need to connect without minimal disruption. So this is a different planning. We need to speak through operations, and we just need to make sure that as this integration moves forward, that we are aware that this business is operating on large volumes.
Yes, that is so true. And I think about when you're rolling out those integrations and you're thinking about that long term, like what should companies or how should companies be thinking about? I think about things like governance, like flexibility, system of record alignment before they just start putting those tools together. More importantly, I think the governance piece, like how is that going to work? But any insight there or anything you'd share?
From a governance standpoint, I think platform to platform, those businesses usually have this really thought through. But when it comes to what about the data, when the data starts moving and floating, this is where governance and authorities sort of get lost. So we need to think across access and company record, like who should have access to which type of data as we're moving information from one platform to the other and sort of flow. And that is something that is often skipped because we're moving with the technical aspect or we're moving with the operation process aspect, and we never really pause the planning to say, well, are we okay with the permission set that are set up across every platforms as new
Yeah.
data is going to flood in?
Yeah, 100%. I think in working with clients on a day-to-day basis at all different segments, not just enterprise, but it seems like, we hear folks say, yes, I have this system and I want to integrate it. Let's say NetSuite as an example. I want to integrate NetSuite with HubSpot. And it's almost like if we could give one piece of advice and something that I feel like I share, and I know I've heard you share this before, I've learned some of this from you actually, is, hey, let's break that down. Like what when you say integrate, what exactly do you want to integrate? Like there's so much in a NetSuite and there's so much in a HubSpot. And sometimes we don't slow down enough to go, okay, you know what? It's actually the contact data and it's the opportunity data and it's the company data. And yes, I have maybe attachments that I want to move back and forth, or I have transactions or maybe goals or certain, whatever that is. And if you're able to break that down, almost call it from an object perspective, right? If we can break down those objects, and then I think about some of the other things that you share a little bit, Justine, are like frequency, like how often do we want to send the information back and forth? which one is going to be that system of record. I don't know that folks usually think through, hey, if we're connecting NetSuite and HubSpot, like if there's one piece that says something and another piece says something in another system, like which one takes over? Which one is that source of truth? Any other insights there? Anything else you would add that's like a big, hey, if I was going to walk through this today, what would I do? Or what are some of the first things I would do?
I think another thing that is often overseen is what is the ultimate business goal we're trying to achieve by integrating those systems. So we're just jumping ahead, asking for integration, and just having this like wonderful idea that everything is going to be shown on every single platform. But at the end of the day, what is the business goal that we have behind that integration? And I think it's almost revert engineering the entire process. At the end of the day, what type of operation will this integration support? If it's from an accounting perspective, then let's make sure that the invoicing process and the quoting process is strong, and the accounting team is seeing exactly what they need to get their job done. And so we remove some big gear, the process gets seamless, and working integration project from a business standpoint is also so valuable. And as technical folks, we rarely take time to pause and think this through.
Yeah, 1000%. Justine, can you walk us through a time when you had an enterprise level integration with HubSpot go really, really well? What are some of the things that made that successful?
I think like having a strong mapping chart, whether it's from Lucid or whether it's from Miro, just having a clear picture of where are we going, what is the way that the data needs to flow, just having a common understanding and having the right people vet that information is just so valuable, because once you get the seal of approval from all the correct stakeholders, like you can then just confidently move forward with your integration project. So I can think of a medical device company that had all those departments and all those clear head of departments. And once we start connecting their ERP and their shipping management system and then their CRM, like this is where we got so much value, because we had that common understanding of where we were heading. And this was a process that went on over several months, but the approval process ran really smoothly, really straightforward. In case of conflict of alignment, we had a clear stakeholder internally that could vet us and give us approval. And at the end of the day, like after a few months, the client ended up with a system where their ERP was triggering the correct data point in the CRM. So their new customer would receive their like nice marketing automation and this entire like customer management quality that you want. And ERP and delivery system were just floating. So the orders were like talking to the dispatch system and warehouse efficiently. This was a piece on its own that like day one, it just seemed like a monster, like a beast with all those different ramifications. Like it only went well. Like this is a really successful implementation process.
Yeah, I always tell folks I feel like the more time that you spend up front mapping and planning that out and charting it out the right way, man, it pays dividends for you on the backside of that.
It just makes the QA process so much easier, because you know what you're queuing for. You know the quality of ensure that you need to run to ensure that the client is getting the process they're looking for. Deep diving and building and having those discussions too early can lead to just poor quality assurance at the end as well.
Yeah, 100%. On the flip side of that, Justine, have you ever seen an integration completely just blow up? And why? Why did it happen?
So yes, like I do have one in mind, and this one actually has common ground with other several projects that ended up going south. But for an integration project to blow out of proportion, I think when we decide on a common ground with a client to start with an MVP, like start with like the most basic integration that we need to support process and a crawl walk run approach, we're always going to leave something on the table, right? Like we're going to make concession, we're going to like agree altogether that some process won't be integrated from day one, and this is a phase 2 and a phase 3. But as phase 1 is being released, the clients gain some of the data that is being integrated and that supports some process, and we just put phase 2 on the back burner. And then we put phase 3 in a year. And next thing you know, because the project hasn't rolled out as expected, they're missing key pieces from their integration, because the end game was never to only have phase 1. It was to have phase 2 and then phase 3. And so I want to say, like, if we're planning an enterprise level integration and we plan on rolling out in phases, even if we're seeing small wins from phase 1, we need to keep running. We need to keep running for phase 2, because at the planning phase and the discovery phase, there were reasons why we decided to roll out in phases. So yeah, projects are blowing out of proportion when we think that an MVP is enough.
Yeah, I think about too. It's one of those. There are tools in a toolbox to be able to use for integrations, right? It's not a cut and dry. Here's how we do it the same way every single time. It's kind of like you use a screwdriver for a certain tool, you use a wrench for a certain tool, you use other tools for other certain things, and there are. It's almost like integrations are like that. There's almost like a stair step approach around different ways that you could attack that. And I think one of the things that I've seen personally from like an integration, let's say, not go as well as we would want it to, it usually has to do with not being able to get to that data in some form or fashion on the other side of the house. So HubSpot can be being completely open API. You could pretty much send anything in and out of it you want. We're very familiar with it, but there are some times where we run across those systems, not your typical ones. I would say like the NetSuites, the Salesforces of the world, we're so in tune with those and do those so often that it makes it really easy to work with that data. But sometimes folks will have their own systems or custom systems, and just being able to get to that data or to transform or to change that data down the road, that's usually I think for me has been the sticking point where some maybe don't go as well. Do you agree? Disagree?
And I think this is the point where you need to have quality developers to jump in and help, right? Because as you mentioned, like Open has an open API and we can fetch pretty much any data. But if the source or the destination is a homegrown CRM system that's been built over a decade, you need to have the people with the right creative mindset, but also the technical skills to just go about finding the correct way to get that data and preserve the quality of the data to bring inside HubSpot in the correct format for reporting or for operations. So this is where like there is a part that will remain always, let's figure this out. Like if we work with systems that are not necessarily as out of the box or that are super customized, like we need to have that flexibility of just jumping in and opening up the hood and like finding the right solution for the client.
Yeah, I think, moving more to like a strategic integration, and we've talked a lot about planning, like how important is it to define a single source of truth before building out the integration?
It's a source of truth, but it's also in conflict resolution. So as you mentioned, like if there's a data discrepancy between both systems at the time of the sync, who has the last say? And this answer might differ if you're talking to sales versus if you're talking to operations. So it's not only planning, but it's also planning on who has the last say and which data is considered as the last data point that will live if there is discrepancy between both platforms.
Yeah, Justine, this is a question that I get all the time. When should a company use a one-way sync versus a two-way sync? You'll sometimes hear the term like unilateral or bilateral or one-way or two-way integration. Like, can you talk a little bit more about the difference or when like use cases around one-way versus two-way?
I think it all comes down to, once again, like the business operation process that we're trying to accomplish. Or for instance, if a deal stage change in HubSpot needs to trigger a quoting or invoicing process that happens outside of HubSpot, one way is totally fine. On the other end, if that quote sign on external platform needs to trigger an operation inside HubSpot, such as a welcome email and then a flow of tasks to be created to the correct person, then it needs to be two ways. So there's that mapping, there's that planning, but it all comes down to what is the operational flow we're trying to support. Another example is order status. So if we have that shipping management platform that is passing order status from that source inside of HubSpot, it needs to trigger like a welcome email to the customer that your package is on this way. By the way, here's your tracking code. Here's a link you can click. So this is all data that's going to pass one way. Like HubSpot has no necessarily like no, we have no need to pass data from HubSpot to that shipping platform.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Justine, I come across folks who have maybe worked with in some form or fashion, or have at least been exposed to middleware or sometimes like the iPaaS solutions like a Zapier, Make, Workato. When and if should enterprise teams consider using those tools versus building out something custom?
And I'm going to oversimplify this, right? So any type of middleware as a pre-map way to sync the data. At SmartBug, we have our own middleware that we build in a way where we know with confidence that the data can be taken from the source and manipulated in the correct way before being pushed inside of HubSpot. Those pre-packaged options, such as Tiligo or Zapier, Like it's essentially the same path. They just decided to release that tool on a larger scales at a larger scale. So essentially, like if you are not dealing with sensitive data, if you're looking for, I want to say like minimal count of sync, like those solutions can be like a really good crawling phase to get really specific data point in a pre-chewed approach where there are systems out there that are available and that have vetted process to pass information from platform one inside of HubSpot and vice versa. If you are a larger company looking to integrate certain system or automate in between platforms, it can definitely be a first touch point with integration, a first way to just dabble into it and see like what is the value we're actually getting from having data floating from one platform to the other with minimal disruption, low cost. And we see this a lot with companies that are much larger and that are working on more, I want to say like platforms that have been released like a decade ago, like they're really risk adverse. So that can be just like a first step.
I think it was like two different tracks or two different avenues sometimes too. From an integration perspective, typically like a Zapier Make or Workato, some of those are like subscription-based models where you're going to continue to pay for that for ever and ever and ever as long as you use it. And a lot of times what we set up from a SmartBug perspective for, again, not only enterprise grade integrations, but just about any integration is more of like a one-time cost. Sometimes there is a hosting fee or some other things there, but for the most part, it's like, hey, we're building custom. It is a one-time project and you don't have that ongoing cost.
With a Zapier of this world, you also don't have full visibility on the calls that might fail. So the API calls that might not get triggered for multiple reasons, as well as you're not necessarily aware of the updates this middleware might have. And if they are massive update being rolled out, you might need to rebuild some of the connectors. Where by building something custom and the hosting of the integration is also something we are offering. Like we take full responsibility of all the calls that will fail. Like we have a backup system that triggers internally so someone can look at it really quickly and make sure that it's not affecting our customers' process. And as well, any type of updates they might have from one platform to the other, we are ready and we usually have a rollout plan to make sure there's no disruption.
Yes, Justine, that is so good. So much value in what you're saying there. All right, let's dive in with what I feel like everybody is talking about today. AI, artificial intelligence. Justine, how does AI play into integrations, or does it play into integrations at all today?
That's a really good question. I feel we're discovering new usage for AI almost every day. The first place where we really saw a lot of value for AI was on the production side, was to help us with the QA process. So to be able to just making sure and vet that the process or the kind of objects or the kind of records that we would be looking for with the integration, like was actually present in both systems. It's the first place where we really saw value. But I know we work on several accounts together where we're able to leverage AI in the integration process.
Yeah, I've seen it in a couple of different use cases today where one is, beforehand or before, AI started playing a big piece is, and we still sort of use this today as a framework is really around like the field mappings. If you're thinking about integrating, let's take Salesforce and HubSpot, and you've got contacts and leads and opportunities and deals, and you have all those properties or fields and be able to match those up. It was sort of a manual process before. I know there's a little bit of automation that maybe HubSpot's built in there, but I have seen use cases where you can basically take that schema and run it through AI, and instead of manually matching those 300 or so fields, AI can at least draft a proposed schema for you. Now, is it the gospel? Is it the end all be all? No, but it gives you a really good starting point. I think the other use case that comes to mind is around medical integrations. So at SmartBug, we do a lot of healthcare or healthcare type accounts integrating to and from HubSpot. And with those organizations, especially at the enterprise level, they are trying to offset their risk from a HIPAA or PHI compliance standpoint. And when you used to have really specialized folks with really specialized backgrounds to say, hey, yes, when integrating those, here are certain things in different ways that you can architect it to offset your risk. Today, you can run that through like an AI deep research model, like having deep research ChatGPT tied into HubSpot, and it will give you a really nice output of, yes, based off of what the schema is today, you are offloading your risk to 0% or 5% or 10% or something like that. So some really cool use cases. I think it's going to continue to evolve pretty rapidly. So it'll be fun to watch over the next few months and few years.
Definitely. And, like AI might be scary for some companies as well, like especially when we're talking about sensitive data or just like larger scale companies that have different operation and different folks where they might not be all comfortable with that level of technology yet. But I've seen some like really creative CEO from large companies using AI as almost like a map, like technically map my brain as I speak through what I'm looking for. So I think it just gives a lot of accessibility to integration to people that are non-technical. So non-technical folks are just able to talk through, and AI can frame what you're trying to convey from a technical perspective, and it just makes the conversation with the client so valuable because like it just level up the field with the developers or the people that don't necessarily have the same mindset.
Yeah. I think too, it's continue to see use cases where some sort of AI model is built into that integration and it starts at least flags issues maybe more quickly or in a different way than having to manually go through those. But yeah, great advice there, Justine, and so much value. We could spend all day talking about the AI piece. I know we're starting to wrap up, but I have a couple of questions here around like marketing ops, RevOps leaders that are listening in. Justine, what are a few practical steps that those folks can take, let's say today, this week, this month, to evaluate and or improve their integration?
So I think we're just going to circle back to my initial advice, which is what is it within the business that we're trying to accomplish integrating system? Whose workload are do we want to elevate? And let's just start from there. Like we see so often potential customers coming to us wanting to integrate everything both ways, and it needs to be done before the end of the quarter. When really, when you start unpacking and listening to the customer story, like their need are A, B, and C only. So if there's anyone from a RevOps perspective that is currently living some pain points or sending the gear when it comes to system not being integrated or some manual labor that need to be done, let's just start with like what are we trying to accomplish? And it all comes down to that planning phase. I like know we sound like a broken record, but enterprise level integration requires correct planning.
Yeah, it's like start with the basics. I think about building a house. If you have a rocky foundation, like you're going to have a leaning house, like let's help you build that foundation really strong. And then from there, hey, the house is great.
And from a really like technical standpoint, the integration, like that pause that we give ourselves during the integration process also allow us to optimize the current process. So if there are things in NetSuite or in Salesforce that are built a certain way that prevents you from correct reporting, that prevents you from getting the correct KPI that would just support leadership in decision to XYZ. Let's just take this pausing moment to sort of make sure that we're cleaning up the house and we're cleaning up the receiving house. And when those systems are connected, we do have visibility on that that quality of data that would just allow us to move stronger. So let's just not see this as a step back and this planning phase as a pain, but more as the opportunity to just do things better.
Yeah, Justine, if somebody is evaluating HubSpot today and they're worried about the integration complexity, what do you say to them?
HubSpot is a wonderful tool to integrate with, as in it's an open API, and there are a lot of strong developers that definitely can support the integration need. Um, so, like, usually the worry should be about their current system that might create bottlenecks, but the flexibility of HubSpot shouldn't be something to slow down an integration project.
I think about the SmartBug team and how we play into this. I get the question a lot from HubSpot reps, HubSpot managers, HubSpot customer success folks, and clients that HubSpot's working with. And they say, hey, have you done this integration before? And yes, you run across the common ones, but there are all these other systems. And I use the Peyton Manning analogy for it. It's kind of like asking, hey, has Peyton Manning ever played on your local high school football field? And I want to say, no, Peyton hasn't came and played on my field, but guess what? Peyton was really, really good at football, and Peyton could probably outplay us on any field. And I feel like that's how SmartBug is. We have really great developers on our side who it doesn't really matter what system it is, as long as we have access to the data, we can typically integrate it in some form or fashion. Anything else you had to add to that?
For sure. I think at this point, once you have the correct skill set in the team to work on those integration, it all comes down to the attitude and the yes, let's do it energy. Because as you mentioned, like we're scoping integration projects like several times every day. And if I look into my reporting, I want to say that it rarely happens where we integrate with the same systems. Like every tech stack for every company is so different and can vary so much that at the end of the day, you just need to have the correct folks that are just going to say, yeah, let's do it. We have the skill set, and we like our commitment to you is to just deliver that project seamlessly.
Yes, Justine, that is such valuable information. It's so good. I think about HubSpot, it is a best of breed software in a lot of different cases, but there are other things that make a lot of sense to integrate, right? So that way you're able to get that best of breed in maybe other softwares or other systems and pull that in and out of HubSpot. So that way you have a unified reporting, unified customer platform, unified customer journey reporting, attribution reporting, all those fun things. So there's been so much value that you've given today, and we could really spend, gosh, I could spend all day talking about integrations. It's such a fun thing, and I know like people are like fun things integrations, but I think about in most cases today from a HubSpot perspective, it is a bread and butter type application, right? It is one of those things that today people want to be able to connect to their HubSpot instance, send things in and out of HubSpot, and be able to have that data in a unified place. So, Justine, that's a wrap for today's episode of SmartBug on Tap. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Love hearing your war stories. Love hearing the good and bad there too, basically around the integrations and really what it takes to make HubSpot work in a complex enterprise environment.
Thank you for having me, Casey. It was really a lot of fun. As you say, like, I feel we could have speak about this for hours, but more than happy to chat with anyone that is going through or thinking about similar process.
Yeah, same here. So if you're listening out there and you're deep in the woods of a migration or just starting to explore what's possible, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our emails are in the episode description. Reach out if you need help, or if you just want a second opinion, you want to talk about HubSpot, our door is always open. We're happy to be a sounding board for you. We're here for anything that you need. Thanks again for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to SmartBug on Tap so that you don't miss future episodes, and we'll catch you next time.